Alright, here's the logo. You know what that is. Okay, so my book was White Teeth by Zadie Smith, and an interesting thing about Zadie Smith is she herself is mixed. Her mom's from Jamaica and her dad's like English, which is actually one of the characters in the book, so I think she kind of wanted to portray herself in the book. And basically, this book it's not like hard to follow, but it's just there's a lot of different things going on with a lot of different people. So one of the main things that my book talks about is society, and it mostly focuses on like a clashing of cultures, religion, race and ethnicity, class. And so one of the main characters, like I said, is a girl. Her name's like Irie, I think that's how you pronounce it. And her mother's from Jamaica. Her mother's name is Clara, and she's about 19. And then her father, his name is Archie, and he's English, and he's like 40-something. And then they also have neighbors that live in the same little apartment place as them, and they're from Bangladesh, and they're Muslim. And the father's name is Samad, and then the woman's name is Alsana. And they have two twin boys, Majid and Milat, and they're both, and the father is like that type, he wants to like keep the family name going and keep tradition and roots, so he really wants his boys to like grow up with really good Muslim education while they're in, like, this is taking place like in Europe, so he really wants them to like go back to their roots and make their family name proud. And then also later on into the book, they introduce a middle-class white family. They're called the Chalfins. And eventually like the two Muslim boys, and then Irie herself is atheist, and then also the Chalfins, it never really said, they're like Jehovah Witness. So it's like you already have these people who already come from three very different backgrounds, and then their children themselves become even more diverse because they're mixing with everybody else. And so it's like you have the parents who want to keep the bloodline pure, and then you have the children who are trying to figure out who they are. So it's just a constant going back and forth, and it also does do a lot of time jumps without it. But it's overall like a really pretty interesting book. I enjoyed it myself, and I think it had a really good message about society, about the amalgamation of cultures and all that. So the first thing, what I was wondering is like, why would you name a book White Teeth? That doesn't make sense at all. And throughout the book, there's a lot of references about teeth. Like it will subtly mention like, oh, her teeth, I saw her white teeth, and you're like, what the hell does that mean? But basically, one of the main things that I noticed is like, it talks about like maintaining white teeth, and that's why I have the little brush right there. But as a way to like maintain your teeth is kind of as a symbolism to maintaining tradition. It's like staying true to your culture. Like how I mentioned how Samad, he wants his children to grow up with good Muslim education. And so when you're taking care of your teeth, it's a way as taking care of your culture. And then also, teeth are also as a sense of identification, like, you know, in CSI or in forensics. We use teeth whenever we have a skeleton. You get their dental records, and that's how you can identify who this person is. So in one way, teeth can be a way as to individualize someone. And then also, I was reading an article about, because the author herself never really flat out says what she means by white teeth. It's more of just kind of like interpretation. But one of the articles pointed out, and I thought this was a really good explaining it, as like it's also as a sense of unification, because in some way or another, I know not literally, but in some way everyone's born with white teeth. Whether you're Jewish, atheist, Christian, black, white, Hispanic, doesn't matter. We're all born with the same set of teeth basically. And so, and in the book, it's like everyone is so different and so diverse, but at the end of the day, they all have white teeth. And it's as a sense of like, I guess you can kind of say like we're all different, but we're also all human. And so it shows like how they're all able to live together and come together as people, despite the fact that this person might not believe what that person thinks, or this person might not agree with what that person says. So it just shows like the duality of teeth as both identifying different people and then also unifying them. And then also throughout the book, they have some of the chapters are called like the root canal of Archie Jones or something. And whenever it mentions a root canal, they end up going really, really deep into that person's past, which is like what I mentioned when they do the time jumping. And so, and if you think about a root canal, despite the fact they're like really painful, it's like they're really going down into the root, and they're going really, really deep in there to get to the source of the problem. And so similarly in these chapters, whenever they title it the root canal, it's like going back to your roots. It's going back to that person, where they're coming from, understanding just why that person is the way they are, which I thought was really clever in tying with the whole teeth thing. So root canals signify going back to your roots and really getting to understand the person. And then, like I said, the duality of teeth down there. And then also one of the main things is religion, and or lack of, like I said, Clara and Erie, they're atheists. And one of the things I realized is that the characters are not stereotypes of their religion. Like, you can have people that are Muslim and think that they act a certain way because that's how you know Muslims act. Or Christians, like, not all Christians are like, going to church every Sunday, reading the Bible, and all praying every night. So, and these characters are just the exact same way. They don't, just because they're Muslim, that doesn't identify themselves, that doesn't define who they are. And so, each person acts as an individual despite what their religion is. They don't let their religion define who they are. And as I mentioned before, when Samad wanted to honor the name, he actually sends one of, it's like, as he described it, like the good promising son, Majid. He sends him back to Bangladesh in order to get the good Muslim education, while the other one, Milad, who's like the troublemaker or whatever, he keeps him here because he really doesn't care what he does with his life. And the irony in this is that when he sends back Majid to Bangladesh, it's like, and they also mentioned like the turmoil going on in India and Bangladesh at the time, but Majid comes back, he's like Christian, and he's like had a good English education there. And then his son Milad got involved into, it was a very, very long name, but the acronym for it is Kevin, and it's basically like, what are those, they're like the, I can't think of the word right now, but it's like the really strong like Islam groups, like, I can't think of the word. But it's like, he got involved to an extremist, an Islam extremist. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of the word. He got involved into an extremist group here in Europe, which was called Kevin. So it was like he had his one son go off and do one thing that he thought was going to happen. The other son comes back a completely different person, and then the one that was here did a completely different thing. So this goes into the whole identity thing, how they don't allow what their religion is to define who they are. And then also, it shows like the diversity of individuals within different environments, such as the English education back in Bangladesh, and then also the presence of the Islamic extremist group here in Europe. And then another pillar that she adds on is society and class. And for the majority of the book, it kind of seems like one thing, like you have two minorities, both in working class environments, and then they introduce the Chalfins, as I mentioned, which are the white middle class family. And basically what Zadie Smith does is she presents a utopian view of society, and this utopian view is that yes, there are a lot of different people being shoved into one really cramped up space, but the fact they're all able to mind their own business and they're all able to get along, which isn't something that we see a lot today, is because like some people feel the need as like, oh well, this person's here next to me, I can't live with this person near me. But in the book, these people are all able to live together in some sort of peace and harmony, and so that's why they describe it as a utopian view, because this isn't really the case for everywhere else. And it also shows that when the Chalfins come together, it's a long story, but basically their son gets caught smoking weed or something, and he blames it on the daughter Erie and then one of the twin sons. And as their punishment, this teacher makes the Erie and Milat go to his name was like John or something. They go to his house for studying, and the president was like, oh, this is such a great opportunity for like the minorities to be together with like the rich people, so we can all get along together. And so after this time of spending with each other with Erie and Milat, they realize how much different that family is from them, because the mother Joyce kind of takes Milat under her wing as like her own son, and then Erie is just like intrigued by this whole by the relationship between mother and father to the children, because that's something she never really had growing up. So then Erie, I'm really sorry. Erie is like, wow, this is how families are supposed to be. And then Milat is just like, Milat is really interested in like the whole, he's also like dabbling in Jehovah's Witness and all that stuff. So they end up spending more time at the Chalfins' house than they do at home. And this starts really concerning their mothers, Clara and Alsana. And they're like all like, oh my gosh, they're gonna like Englishify our children. So this goes back to the whole theme of like going back to your roots, because they don't want, Clara herself already feels like she's watered down her bloodline enough anyway by marrying a white guy. And so she doesn't necessarily want Erie to like keep on like watering it down. And so she's like, oh, she's gonna change this. She's not like, you know, then from generations from now, her children aren't even gonna know they're Jamaican and all that. And then Alsana's like, oh, Milad isn't even gonna marry a woman from Bangladesh. So they're all like concerned about what their children are going to do after them. And just bringing in the white middle class family just makes the fear even more apparent, because now they have to worry about what they're teaching their children and all that stuff. Bless you.
So sorry.
And then finally, one of the biggest things that she mentions is is race and ethnicity. And at the very, very beginning of the book, when Archie met Clara, and of course the age difference itself was really creepy, but I remember at the beginning of the book, Clara got pregnant with Irie when she was about 19 or 20. And so Archie was working at the time, and he goes to like his job, and he's like, oh, my wife's pregnant, we're so happy. And his boss approaches him in like an office, and he's like, hey, listen, I know your wife's pregnant, but you really can't be going around saying this stuff, because this is really making us uncomfortable. And he wasn't saying it because of the age gap, he was saying it because Archie's white and Claire's Jamaican. And so, and he was just like, I can't understand why I can't, you know, spread the joy of my wife being pregnant just because of the fact that our child is mixed. And so that was one of the first cases of race and ethnicity being a problem, and like other people being uncomfortable with the mixing of them. And then also, later on in the book, Clara didn't talk to her grandmother from Clara's side, and her name's like Hortense, and she's very traditional Jamaican style woman. And she finally goes and visits hers after 6 years later, and she's talking to her, and her mom just just casually mentions into the conversation. She's like, oh yeah, you know, I told your mom, like, white people and black people aren't supposed to mix at all, like that, nothing good ever comes out of that. And she's just kind of sitting there like, oh, thanks, grandma, you know, and all that. And so it's showing like the stigma of not just like from white people against minorities, but it's also minorities too that feel that way. It's like they don't want to. They want to keep a pure bloodline, and they want children that can represent that and make their family proud, and not have these children who are struggling to trying to please both sides of, you know, both sides. And then also, like how I mentioned, is Clara and Alsana worried about the Englishification of her children, and race and ethnicity was like the biggest one in that I saw out of all the two that I mentioned earlier, because it's just like, everyone's really trying to like find their place in there. Irie, she's confused. She's like the most confused out of all of them, because she wants to make her mom happy, but then she also doesn't want to disappoint her father. Even though he really doesn't like have any like tradition that he really holds up. He's just kind of there. But Clara really does, and then the Bangladeshis, they really want to. So it's like everyone's trying to figure out who they are in this story while also coming to terms with each other. And the overall societal point that Zadie's trying to make is that like, no matter how much we can try our best to segregate ourselves, we can say, oh, that's like, you know, a community where the majority of Hispanics, the majority of black people live here. But at the end, no matter how much we try to separate, there's going to be people that slip in between the cracks and that do mix with each other. You're going to have people, and that's not a bad thing, and we shouldn't be afraid of that mixing happening, because this is how we get other traditions, other cultures into it. And so, it's not like we should fear change and fear like a mixing of cultures, but rather embrace it and like, you know, embrace the differences and like, what's the word? Acknowledge them, but don't allow them to divide us. And because I mean, at the end of the day, like you say, America's a melting pot, so mixing is inevitable, but it's also can be seen as a beautiful thing, and that's just kind of the whole thing she's trying to make, is because nothing really major happens at the end of the story. It just kind of leaves you right there. And I think that's a good message, because it's like a realistic view that, you know, life is going to go on. Nothing major is going to happen because, you know, one girl's mixed and the other one isn't. So it had a very realistic view of society, and, you know, I thought it was cool.